That was a good that was a good podcast.
That was a really good podcast. We touched on it wasn't planned, of course, unscripted, but we touched on a topic, and it was essentially when you're on a sales call, how do you find your way home? So if you follow tangents, if you go off to see, what's on that path, whether or not there's a bit of gold,
Yep.
how do you know how to actually
Yep.
get back to where you need to be and continue accordingly?
Yeah, the better you get at selling and the less that you require a script, and the more that you begin to trust your instincts and sense things that a young, inexperienced salesperson doesn't sense because they're inexperienced, the more, in my lived experience, you should trust that and go with that and see if there's something there, and back yourself in. But you got to know when to retreat if it's going nowhere and we're spinning the wheels, and you got to know how to get things back on track. Otherwise, the call could come to a dead end and it just doesn't go anywhere. So we covered a lot of that today. It was a good call. You and I both love tangents, myself in particular. So we'll see whether the viewers enjoy it as well.
Yeah, and one final point, we tied a bow on all of it, brought it together, and essentially mapped out what you, or at least what you should know to be able to bring that back to where it needs to be. But this was a banger of a podcast, and I hope you enjoy it.
Fun one. I'll see you next week, James.
Thanks, Michael.
Do that. How do you stop yourself from getting lost on a sales call? Because you and I don't use scripts. So how do we not lose control, lose focus, get taken into the weeds, allow them to dictate, all that sort of stuff?
So I heard a really good analogy, and I think we'll take.
Are we recording?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right.
I heard a really good analogy, and I will preface this by saying it's not my analogy. Someone told it to me, and I believe it's another sales trainer or coach's expression. And it said, imagine a sales call is like a hike with a group of people, and you have the person leading at the front that just says, we must stay on the trail. We have to follow this process. But then someone towards the back just kind of looks at a sign and says, oh, there's a waterfall over there. I want to see what's over there. And the person in the front's like, no, we must follow the one path. The person at the back says, I'm going to go over there. I can always get back to the path.
Yep.
So most people teach sales to be the person at the front, as in you must follow this path. You can't deviate. Whereas I think to avoid truly getting lost, you have to know what the path actually looks like and not be worried to go off on a tangent, see a waterfall, because you can always come back to where you need to be. Yep.
Well, what if the waterfall is the most exciting thing on the trip, and effectively, had you not pursued your interest in said waterfall, like the trip would have been insignificant? I mean, I'm always on as are you. I'm always on the lookout for golden nuggets, and golden nuggets can come anywhere, anytime, in any scenario. And I would hate to think that I was in a straitjacket and had to stay on a straight line, and that didn't enable me to trust my instincts, which the older I get, the more I trust, where the sniff of an opportunity was. And I went off on a tangent, ended up in a waterfall, had a swim, and got everything I wanted. Whilst those that marched on in the straight line completed the task, but have got nothing to show for it. I know what sort of salesperson I'd rather be.
100%. 100%. And I think the majority of the time, the sale is actually made in the tangents. When you go off track, when you don't follow the rigid process. I mean, neither of us follow a rigid process. We have a framework. We know what we've got to tick off. But I think having that ability to deviate from that framework, you're going to make so many more sales, but you're also going to be present on the call. You're going to be there.
Well, it's also a lot more fun. If you think of it as a human interaction, which it is, it's so much more fun if you're able to go off on those tangents, because amazing things happen there. If I think of all the magical moments I've had on sales calls in recent times, and even further back than that, it's when I trusted my instinct to ask a question below surface level, because something they said or the way they said something or something they didn't say made me think there's something there. So framed the right way, I asked what was there, and there usually is something there, and then who knows where that takes us. I would hate to do sales calls and not do that. A, I'd make less sales. B, to be way less fun. C, way less intellectually stimulating, and any sense of gamesmanship. And I believe sales is a game. I look at it in a gamified way. Would be completely removed. All these things make me way less interested to commit this as my craft.
Yeah.
But if you, so just one final point. I'm sure we'll go there in the call. If you are going to go off on tangents, you need to be able to obviously still make it work for you. So it's not this aimless, aimless mission you've gone off in and you don't know where you're going and you can't find your way back and it's going nowhere and you're spinning your wheels and all those sorts of things. Like, you've got to be able to steady the ship again. You've got to be able to bring it back, which I'm sure we're going to talk about
I
on this
have a
call.
very easy process for that. It's if I'm following a tangent
Mm-hmm.
and you always get to a point where you think, yeah, there's nothing here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always just like, okay, great. Now, just before you mentioned this,
Yep.
when you said, it's so easy to do. You go,
Mm-hmm.
you following this path, it's not going anywhere. You just jump right back to where you were and get them to talk about something that they want. But that's the how. One very distinct thing that we needed to point out is that style of selling, as in having a script in front of you, being able to follow it, that is unique to the remote sales world. And yes, more things are being sold remote, but if you ever get to the point where maybe you want to scale something else, maybe you want to work in a company that's not completely inbound, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to figure out how to have interactions with people without a script in front of you. You're not going to be able to follow that exact same framework every time. Maybe you've hit them with outbound. You're not going to be able to do the same process. So you need to be able to figure out how to get back to it.
Yeah. I mean, even if you have a script, as soon as it makes contact with the prospect, they answer and their answer isn't on script. I mean, in some scenarios, they could give a scripted answer where the way the question's structured and who you speak to, it's 99% they're going to answer a certain way, one or two things or one or three things, and you know what to say for each response. But in more of a dynamic situation, you have no idea what they're going to say. And then it becomes a live call the minute that they respond. Like, maybe everything up until your first question is planned and scripted, but then as soon as you ask that first question and they, process that and respond accordingly, you're off script. What do you do next? If you rely on a script, so you and I, obviously, neither of us have a need or a desire to use a script. It's just not useful. There's a time and a place where it's useful. When you're at the very start of your journey, all those sorts of things. Yeah, of course. You're learning. You don't know what you don't know. This is some sort of guide for you. You can have some degree of success with it. But as you ascend through the gears and move into more sophisticated selling with more sophisticated prospects, you're not going to want it. You're not going to need it. And you're going to do worse if you have it.
I'll add one caveat to that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try and throw it away too early. And one thing I say to a lot of people that are up and coming is when you're on a sales call, remote, you can do this. Have your script open on one side of the screen. So even if you get halfway through a call, you're on fire, and then you realize, like, whoa, I'm doing really well. You get distracted and you lose a little bit of where you are or what you need to do. Have that there just so you can look. So the growth path for me was obviously learn, understand, do a lot of sales calls, get comfortable, have the script in front of me. Then when I got to the point where I don't even need that script, I just have an Apple Notes open and I just duplicate this template every time. And it has just 1 or 2 words for all of the areas or all of the things that I need to tick off. And I think there's 6 to 8. And I just jot my notes down in that. So even if I get towards the end of the call, halfway through a call, and I think, oh, is there anything else I haven't tied off? It's there in front of me and I'm doing it with my notes anyway. And I just don't get to the point now where I think, oh, what haven't I done? I've just got that there because I'm using it for notes. So I think that's I don't think it's stop and do nothing. I think it's use an ascension plan.
I still use a version of what you're saying. There's no script element to it, but the one account I still sell for, we use HubSpot as our CRM. And for those that use HubSpot, you obviously can create templates. And every time I open up my notes for a sales call, I go to calls, I open it up, it's fresh. I then do hashtag call notes 2024, and immediately populates a series of headings with a dot point below it, which is ABC, which enables me to write over that, and that's my first dot point. And I've got like 4 or 5 key headings in sequence. Now, I don't mind if I have to move that order around, but it sets the scene for the areas I'm going to cover. And then I populate that. It makes my notes really, really orderly. It means that not that I would, because they're embedded in my memory, the key areas I've got to get, but let's say I wasn't quite there yet. It means I don't forget or miss sections, and it gives me a structure, but nothing that sits within that is scripted. Everything is natural. I'm not bound by that structure. Those 4 headings or 5 headings, I will move them around. I will jump from number 1 to 5 if the conversation takes me there, but then I'll go back and get number 2 and 3 and 4 as appropriate. So that's one way that I can go off on tangents and freestyle yet there's an underpinning structure that supports me as appropriate. I find that works really, really well. That sounds quite similar to what you do.
Yeah. Same process.
Yeah.
Same process. And notes at the end of the call are very, very easy.
Yeah. Have you do you do your calls on Zoom?
Yeah.
Have you got the new AI plugin that came like 2 weeks ago with Zoom? It seems to be a standard that's come with it.
I haven't.
We got it on the account I sell on. It was automatically installed. I don't know if it was paid for, I'm not sure, but it probably gives the best AI summary I've ever seen. And it comes out like 30 seconds after the call ends. So I get a double dip on my notes now. The notes I created, that report is issued. I copy and paste that into the comments below my generated notes. And in terms of, record keeping and storytelling, especially for a prospect you can have multiple touch points with, or multiple year relationships with, which for the Peter account that I sell with, they typically are multiple year accounts. We go back and renew them the next year more often than not. I see them in person at the event, and I like to check my notes to be like, what did that Peter guy say when I met him last year? He's the guy that wants to do ABC. So it's awesome. If you haven't got it, I'd recommend getting it. Best notes.
I've tried a lot of the note-taking ones. I just use Claude. I have a project set up, and the exact same thing. I like my notes to be a particular way, and I find that all of the note-taking software out there, you just have to deal with this one-size-fits-all word in generic. The prospect said, "Mr. So-and-so said this."
This isn't like that. No,
it isn't.
It's actually really good. Like, I too haven't had a good experience so far with AI summaries. I'll send you a report. I'll send you one of my reports so you can have a look at it. But it breaks it down into headings, and it's almost as if it were written by a human, in the sense that it seems to encapsulate the key moments of the call, and it's very readable. I'm a big fan.
I'll send you across some of the stuff and the project that I use. I'll give you access to it just so you can have a dip. The framework I have is just the bullet points, as in this much of the page at the top. So at a glance, I know what happened, and then the summary, more detailed summary below. Yeah. Because you know what it's like. If someone gives you a call and you remember them, but you don't remember exactly them. So hey, how you doing? What's been going on? You're chucking it in the CRM. In 10 seconds, you've got a full summary of everything that happened.
Yep. So we're in agreement that tangents have their time and place, and there's value there. How, for those that haven't yet reached a level of competence or confidence to take themselves off on a tangent and feel that they retain a degree of control and retain a roadmap back to getting, landing the plane, what would be your tips? What would you say to that person?
So I find it quite interesting that you and I just went off on a tangent, and you very beautifully brought it back to the topic of the call.
I do like my tangents, and I'm very curious of bringing them back, as you would know.
You are a man that's known for tangents. So how do you go about bringing it back? Well, I think the first thing to point out is you're not going to get it right for the first dozen times. You're going to go off on a few tangents, and you're going to think, well, that was a waste of 15 minutes.
I think just to hold that point for 1 second, I think anything new that you're doing in sales and in life, very rarely you're going to get it right the first time, and you have to give yourself permission to, it might be 4 out of 10 on the first go, and then the second time it's 4.5, and time passes and eventually becomes an 8, 9, or 10. You have to give yourself permission to do that. Any of the progress you and I have made or success you and I have had, it wasn't jumping from 1 to 10 in one move. Yeah. Little tangent.
Yeah. If we want to get back to it, say for example, the prospect maps out 2 or 3 issues that they're having. You're going to pick one that you think will be the biggest hitter. As in, okay, so you mentioned this, let's talk about that. What's going on there? You get them to unpack it, and if you get a few minutes in and you realize they don't really know what they're talking about, maybe it was a throwaway comment, maybe they don't know what's actually happening. No worries. Okay, cool. Hey, just quickly before, you mentioned this as well. Can we talk about that?
Can I stop you there?
Yes.
How do you know? Do you have is there a sign that makes it clear to you there's nothing there? And by extension, do you have one final roll of the dice? Like, do you have a sort of go-to question or way of asking a question or way of exploring the topic before you put a line through it? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. And you have to be comfortable to do it. There's no science to this isn't going anywhere. It's a feeling of maybe they started rambling. Yeah, they started rambling. Maybe they start talking about what their sister's cousin did and how it related to them. And if I want to do a roll of the dice, I don't often, because I've usually asked some questions to try and bring it back. I just might say, hey, just so I understand, how does this connect with what we were talking about before?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't connect.
So
Oh,
you'd go
this.
straight for the how question. You wouldn't ask the
Yeah.
what, like, does it connect? Am I missing something? You'd ask, how does it connect? You'd go that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
Okay. I probably would. I could go the how card. We're in the art part, so it's all based on feel. It's based on intuition. It's based on what feels right in the moment, as opposed to a science per se. Like, if they do this, I say that. It's not. It's intuition. It might be a how-based question, but it could also be a what-based question. And it could also be a genuinely curious question communicating that I don't really see what's going on here, and can they enlighten me? Like, that's the context. Like, I might say something like, James, you've been speaking about your cousins for a couple of minutes now, which is great. Can I ask, is that relevant to why you're on the call today? Is there some sort of connection there? Am I missing something you haven't told me about yet? I mean, what's the main reason we're still talking about your cousins? I might say something like that. And I'll see what they say.
Michael response as well. We're saying the same thing in very, very different ways.
Oh, we have our different ways. And then I'll see what they say in the back of that. They might go, oh, no, I'm just rambling. Or they might go, yeah, actually, my cousin's the reason I'm on the call. I'm like, okay, interesting. What's going on there? Oh, well, she told me I should get in this call because ABC. Oh, right. And then we'll unpack that. But we might have unlocked something here. Like, what the hell's ABC? Why is your cousin getting you on a call? Why didn't you initiate the call? Do you want to be on this call? Are you here under duress? Like, there's so much to potentially open up here, and God knows what sort of tangents we might go off on. That could be where all the gold is. Again, if you're in a straitjacket, you never went there. And that could be where the sale lives.
So you've reminded me. So I've been doing the AI courses this week, and one thing that I talk about in there is the decision tree, and how you can always go back. So basically, I could bring up my iPad and actually draw it out, but I think I can just map it out. So basically, if you start at the bottom of a tree
on this unscripted podcast, if you started drawing,
actually, I can draw for you if you like.
If you think it would enhance the experience for our viewers, then hey, I'm not going to tell you no.
Okay, so give me about 5 seconds to connect this, and you can continue chatting to fill in that space.
Chatting to fill in the space. What would I be chatting about? It's Thanksgiving here today. I'm about to go to Thanksgiving dinner straight after this for our viewers. This is Thursday, Thanksgiving in the States, although I'm down here in Guatemala. Just to put a timestamp on it, 28th of November. Can I stop talking?
Yeah, you can. So what I'll do is I'll just share the screen of the iPad, and I'll actually draw it out. And I think maybe this will help some people.
So I'm not familiar with the decision tree in the context of what you're referring to, and maybe you've got your own version of one. Like, this is new to me as well for our viewers.
Screen, window. All right. So, okay, cool. So can you see a black screen now?
Can see a black screen, yep.
Cool. So this is the way I envision sales, not all sales, but this topic, as well as how you use AI. So basically you have the base of the tree here. And then at the start of the call, there might be 1, 2, 3 reasons as to why that individual's on the call, or what they're hoping you might be able to help with. You can't target all of them at once. So maybe you're going to take this branch over here on the left, and then you're going to unpack it. And then maybe there are 3 different tangents associated with this one. Again, you can't unpack all of them. So maybe you follow this branch, and then you follow this branch, and you follow this branch. So these are the tangents that we're talking about. Gotcha. And so how does that relate to? Which means, because, can you give me an example? So you follow these paths off, but at any point in time, you can come right back to the base of the tree, and maybe you followed this tangent, you've got as much as you can over in this area, and then no worries at all. So I remember at the start of the call as well, you mentioned that your cousins said A and B. Are we able to have a chat about that? Every decision you make on a call is basically sending you off on another branch or another tangent. And I think people will follow this and they'll think, oh God, I'm here, it sucks, let's just go into the pitch. That art of realizing, like, whoa, let's go all the way back to the start.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Correct.
I've come this far, I might as well just double down.
And I genuinely think if we want to get really decent or really technical, I think the majority of sales are made somewhere in about this realm here or this realm here, when you're about 4 or 5 layers deep, 4 or 5 branches deep, but you still have to have that confidence to be able to unpack the layers or branches of the descent tree. But again, if you get to here and you realize that maybe this one isn't working, this one isn't working, maybe that one does, or maybe this one does, just go back and just say, no worries. Hey, can we talk about this? You mentioned this before. I know you mentioned your cousin said this, but also you said this. I think that's an interesting visualization for people to understand.
Yeah, I haven't seen this. Did you come up with this? Is this yours?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Cool. I haven't seen this before. It's definitely different to how I think about it. Cool. So here's the obvious question I have when I look at that. So if you look at the first line, the first vertical line down the bottom, the first one you drew, then there's 3, branches that split off in 3 different directions. How, using the example you just gave, because this is new to me as well, you chose the left-hand branch for the sake of this example. Why did you choose the left out of the 3 options? Were all 3 options in front of you at that given moment in time, or at that point in time did you only get the one branch and the other 2 appeared later on? Like, help me understand what's going on there.
So we're gonna go with the most vanilla intro. So what's going on in your world that prompted you to reach out to us? Well, this is going on, and a little bit of this as well.
Got it.
Okay. Being in sales, you have to take a chance on probability.
Right.
Which one of these do you feel as though is the most likely to lead to something based on the information you have, your experience, your skill?
Do you ask them? Do you ask them to rank, like if they've given you 3 sort of, they've thrown out 3 reasons, I'm hating my job, I've got no money, I'm sick of spending 2 hours in traffic every day, my wife's about to leave me. They sort of throw 3 or 4 things at you at the start. So each of those represents a branch. Do you effectively ask them to rank them in order of importance? Worded better than that, of course. That's very clunky, but do you, create some sort of hierarchy there so that you can have a high chance of choosing the right branch?
And I felt as though it put them more in their analytical mind as opposed to the emotional mind.
Got it.
So I don't want them to get analytical or statistical at this point. I want to understand why they hate their job, why their wife's about to leave them, why they're broke, what that looks like.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's a difference between you and I then, for sure, because I would definitely have them. There's a way to do it, so it doesn't feel so transactional and cold and analytical, and they're being surveyed. But I would definitely want to know which of those are the real needle movers and which of those are the nice to have but not that big a deal at the end of the day. That would be a difference between you and I. But I like the model. Like, I like the visual representation of how a conversation can go, and the tangents, as we said at the start of the call, and the ability to backtrack because you've realised it's a dead end, and neither of us believe in the sunk cost fallacy, even though we're human, so we've all had our versions of having done it. So it's good. Thanks for sharing that. Anything else on this graph that we should share?
No, not at this point.
Cool. So I guess we've still got the same key question. How do you get back on track? Like, how if you've gone off on one of these branches, using your example a minute ago, you just spent 5 minutes going off on a branch. For whatever reason, it's come to a dead end. It doesn't feel like there's anything there. It doesn't feel like a sale's going to be made on this branch because there's not enough meat there, or it just doesn't mean enough, or I don't know, whatever. You don't sense there's a sale there. What's the transition look like? How do you get back to, ground base and sort of go again, or steady the ship, or whatever analogy you want to use?
So just acknowledge with an encouraging statement like, gotcha, makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, I can see that.
Yep.
And then just a transition. But just before, when you mentioned, now I know that you mentioned before, you alluded to this before. Can we talk about that?
Yep.
Acknowledge. So you don't just, well, let's talk about this.
Yep.
No worries, makes sense. Gotcha. Oh, I can see that for sure. I understand. And then transition.
Yep.
And you think that a lot of people get caught in thinking that the call has all of this momentum in that direction. If they try and stop it, everything's over. It's not.
There's a reason this part of the call is called discovery.
Yeah.
You're still discovering. It's not over. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
What's your process there, if you have any?
I will, using your example, like I've gone off on this branch, and ultimately not taking me anywhere, I will always throw a Hail Mary in the sense that before I put a line through it, I'll give them one final chance to make them, or to have them make me aware of something that maybe I'm missing. And if they don't, then it's over, as in that branch is over. Then I'll, transition back to a different line of questioning. So I might say something like, I don't know, using the example we were given before, you mentioned that, you hate driving 2 hours a day in traffic, but based on your answers, James, like, I'm not convinced it's that big a deal based on entirely everything you said. Am I missing something here? Because it sounds like you listen to podcasts both ways and get a lot out of it and actually enjoy it. So what part do you hate? Because based on your answers, I'm missing something clearly. Actually, I don't hate it, Michael. It's not that big a deal. I actually enjoy the 2 hours of silence. You know what I mean? It's gone away. There's nothing there. So then I can say, okay, well, with that being the case, how can we help? Where do we fit in? Like, do you even need our help? Or is life pretty good as it is? No, it's not good as it is. My life sucks. When you say life sucks, what do you mean? Opens up a new branch. The life sucks. So I'll always, before I put a line through a line of questioning, I give it one final chance. And sometimes it comes alive, absolutely. Sometimes something they were withholding because they didn't feel safe or it didn't feel appropriate or they didn't want to share it finally comes out and it unlocks. And I'm like, yes, my instincts were right. This was the right branch. Or they confirm that there's nothing there, but it opens up a perfect segue for like, well, what is there then? And then we get the right branch and then away we go. That's how I think about it.
It's very much the same process. You ask questions until you get to a point where you realize that there's nothing there and you can either change back to something else or in that questioning, they give you something else. But either way, you're changing across.
Sure. I mean, it's the Socratic method, a question-based approach. They have all the answers. Your job is to ask the right questions, which, as you know, was the first thing I was taught in sales 20-something years ago, and I still live by that mantra. If I ask them the right questions the right way at the right time, all will be revealed more often than not. Okay, not every single person opens up, but they're the outliers when you do it well. When you get really good at asking the right questions the right way at the right time, making them feel safe, comfortable, wanting to be there, appealing to their self-interest, so they actually want to engage with you, they see the value in it. I don't know what percentage, but let's say 95% of the time, you'll get a willing prospect. And as you keep asking appropriate questions and building on their answers, the questions get better and better, and you'll eventually find the source, more often than not. Obviously not every single time, but more often than not. And that's where the sale lives. And then if you structure it right beyond that, they ask to buy from you.
That don't want to give you that information. What's your process with them?
Well, it depends in the sense that it depends in what way they don't want to give you the information. Like, there's a couple of avatar or archetypes, could you say? You might get the guy that gets on and just starts barking at you. I don't want a sales pitch, just tell me what you do, something like that. And if you ask him a question, he just bat it, no, I told you I'm not here to answer questions. What do you guys do and how much does it cost? You get that whole thing. Other times it might be really quiet, timid, insecure, frightened people. That's a different way of handling it. Other times you get sort of one-word answers. They're not enthusiastic, or they're not articulate, or they're not present, or they seem to be under sufferance for being on the call. So it depends on what situation we're dealing with, because they handle it different all the time. Maybe that's a call for another day, because you could probably dedicate a complete call to that, and we could run through a few scenarios.
I think so. There's doing the AI courses at the moment. I'm analyzing one of the old calls that I did, and it picked up a quote out of it, and the quote was, "Wait, help me understand then. I don't get it. Why are we even on this call?" Because he kept giving me one-word answers. No, it's fine. Life's all right.
Yep.
And this is multiple layers. Why are we even on the call?
Sure.
All of a sudden,
it's a legitimate question. If you're 10 minutes into a call and all you've had is one-word answers with zero enthusiasm and zero giving from their end, it's an absolute appropriate and required and legitimate question to ask appropriately, because you don't want to trigger fight or flight. Meaning that, if you trigger fight, well, they're going to bark back at you like, who are you to ask me that question? You're getting into that whole vibe. Not a good place to be on a sales call. Or they'll shut down, or they'll literally hang up on you. So we don't want to trigger fight or flight ever on a sale. Well, near ever. There might be some exceptions, but near ever we don't want to trigger it. 99% of the time we don't want to trigger it. we could do a call about the 1% of exceptions another day, perhaps. But
I think we'll do that next week. That'd be a lot of fun because I've had a few examples that are coming to mind now, and what I've said to them and how I've delivered it to a very specific type of person. I think that'll be a fun call for next week.
There is a scenario and a type of person that you have to provoke into action, in the sense that you have to make them feel something, and that something is going to be negative and going to bite your head off, but it might actually open up and bring the conversation alive. You can recover from it, and then you can sort of reset the board, and now the real conversation starts. There are exceptions depending on who you're selling to. Like one of the guys in my program sells to, or used to, I think he's no longer on that role, but he used to sell to like truck drivers and like transport people, and like really short, sharp, to the point, straight shooters, no fluff, just though they would be the sort of person where you'd probably have to do that. But that's a tangent. That's another story. You had an original question before that. How do you open up a question? How do you open up someone who's reluctant? But I think that's another call.
We'll do another call. I like that.
Yep. Cool. So we are both in agreement that when you are suitably skilled, it is in your best interest to follow your instincts and pursue opportunities which takes you off on tangents, which wasn't on the script, and may require you going 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers below surface level, because that's often where the gold is. But you do need to know how to end it if it's not going anywhere, or you sense it's not going anywhere. And you do need to be able to get it back on track to keep this call moving forward, so you don't run out of complete momentum and neither of you want to be on the call anymore.
But that also relies heavily on you having a fundamental understanding of what has to happen on a sales call and what has to happen for a sale to be made.
Correct. You sound like you've done my program, James. Maybe
I have. I might
two
know
modules in my program. What needs to happen for a sale to happen, and what do people buy? I mean, you need to be across all those things. And it's another tangent, another call for another day. It's amazing how many salespeople, including a past version of me, don't actually know and understand how and why people buy, and what needs to be in place in order to have someone who asks to buy from you. Like,
I think what we'll do this week as well, we're going to chuck a link for TSP down. It's just a weekly subscription. Shameless plug on your behalf, because everyone that goes through it, I get DMs every couple of days saying just ridiculous what they're watching, what they're learning. So a little bit of a shameless plug on your behalf. I appreciate
that. Thank you. Well, as a former student who graduated, I appreciate that. And any plug you want to give in the future, you're more than welcome to do so.
Yeah, the student that became a master. But anyway, we don't have to unpack that topic.
You've become a master.
Master.
There's a story for another day.
There is a story for another day.
I wonder if he watches this.
Yeah. All right. I think we've tied a really nice bow on this one. This has been a good one.
Cool. We both love our tangents. I think I might love them just a little bit more than you, but I think you might come around as you get a bit older. I think the older you get, the more you love a tangent, and I have got a few years on you. So I suspect in the future you'll enjoy your tangents even more than you do now.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
Yeah. Cool. Good to see you, James. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.